I woke up at 4:42 to the voice of my father calling me from outside my bedroom door. But he was in a hospital 40 miles away, recovering from surgery when that happened. I didn't just wake up, I snapped awake. 1 second I was in that heavy, dreamless sleep you only get when you're mentally exhausted, and the next, I was sitting bolt upright. My heart was thudding against my ribs, and the air in the room felt thick, like a storm was about to break right inside my four walls. The house was quiet, but it was that fake kind of quiet. You know the one, where you can hear the house breathing, the wood expanding, the fridge humming in the kitchen. Then I heard it. A heavy, familiar footstep on the floorboards right outside my bedroom door. "Elias, you awake, son?" I stopped breathing. It was my dad's voice. It had that low, gravelly rumble he's always had. The voice of a man who spent 40 years working construction and smoking too many cigarettes. But my dad was supposed to be 40 miles away, in a hospital bed, recovering from what the doctors called a routine gallbladder surgery. There was no way on earth he was standing in my hallway in the middle of the night. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stared at the gap at the bottom of the door, expecting to see a shadow block the light from the hallway. "Elias, come out here a second. I need a hand with something." He sounded so normal. That was the part that really got under my skin. He didn't sound like a ghost or a dream. He sounded like he always did when he needed help moving a heavy dresser or checking a leak under the sink. I found myself swinging my legs over the side of the bed before I could even think about it. My feet hit the hardwood, and the floor felt like a sheet of dry ice. I walked to the door and gripped the handle. The brass was freezing, leaching the heat right out of my palm. I turned it, the click of the latch sounding too loud in the silence, and I pushed the door open. The hallway was a tunnel of gray, stagnant shadows. I looked toward the stairs, and there he was. He was standing about 10 feet away, right under the pull-down ladder for the attic. He was silhouetted against the pale moonlight coming through the bathroom window, but I knew that shape anywhere. He was wearing his old green checked flannel shirt, the one with the frayed cuffs and the permanent smell of sawdust. I stood there frozen, my hand still on the doorknob. "Dad?" I whispered. My voice sounded small, like a kid's. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer me. He didn't even move. He just stood there with his back to me, looking up at the attic hatch. "I can't get it to stay shut, Elias," he said. His voice didn't sound like it was coming from him. It sounded like it was vibrating out of the walls themselves. "Help me with the door. Just reach up and close the door for me." I took a step toward him. My legs felt like lead weights, and every instinct I had was screaming at me to go back into my room and lock the door. But it was my dad. If he was hurt, or if he'd wandered out of the hospital in a state of confusion, I had to help him. The air got colder the closer I got. It started to smell weird, too. Not like sawdust anymore, but like wet dirt and that sharp, metallic scent of a hospital wing. I reached the spot where he was standing and looked up at the attic hatch. It was closed tight. "Dad, the door is shut," I said, my voice trembling. He finally turned around. The moonlight hit his face, and I nearly hit the floor. It was him, but it wasn't. His skin looked like gray parchment stretched too tight over his skull. And his eyes, they weren't there. There were just these deep, dark, hollow pits where his eyes should have been, like someone had reached in and scooped them out. He didn't say anything about the attic. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. The screen flared to life, and that bright, clinical blue light made his face look like a jagged mask. He held it out to me with a hand that was gray and mottled with purple splotches. "It's your sister," he said. The voice wasn't his anymore. It was flat and hollow, like a recording played on a loop from a long way away. "She's calling to tell you I am gone." I took the phone from him. It felt like holding a piece of dry ice that wanted to fuse to my skin. I put it to my ear, and through a bunch of static and a sound like a howling wind, I heard Sarah. She was sobbing, that deep, ugly kind of crying where you can barely catch your breath. "Elias, he's gone," she choked out. Her voice sounded like it was coming from 1,000 miles underground. "The doctors, they couldn't stop the bleeding. He passed away at 4:42. I looked up from the screen, my head spinning with a sudden, sharp nausea. The hallway was empty. The figure, the blue light, the phone, it was all gone in the space of a heartbeat. I was standing there alone in the freezing dark, my hands still curved in the air, like I was holding something that had just vanished. I scrambled back into my room and grabbed my own phone off the nightstand. It was dead. I'd plugged it in before bed, but the battery was completely drained, the screen as black as the hallway. I sat there on the edge of the bed in the dark, watching the green numbers on my alarm clock tick toward 5 o'clock, trying to tell myself I just had a really vivid, messed up nightmare because I was stressed about the surgery. But when the sun finally came up and I went back into the hallway to prove to myself it was a dream, I stopped dead. Right where he'd been standing, there was a single damp boot print on the floor. It wasn't water, it was a dark, muddy smear that smelled like a fresh grave. And draped over the banister was his green flannel shirt. I reached out and touched the fabric. It was bone dry, but it was still radiating a faint, fading warmth, as if someone had just taken it off their back seconds ago. I didn't even bother calling the hospital. I just sat on the floor and waited for the real phone call to come. I already knew what time they were going to say on the death certificate. 4:42 a.m. Exactly when he came home to say goodbye.